Our world is rife with countless lies, fabrications, brainwashing, and corruption. And we basically spend most of our lives being deceived, exploited, and convinced of these things. If science is a lie, so is history. And in the end, the monetary economy and capitalism are all fraudulent, one-sided rules designed to unilaterally benefit those who spread those lies. In the series of farces that began in 2020, the uniformly ridiculous response of governments all over the world shows that governments, administrations, and the media are harmful institutions that spread lies and fabrications. It is also an elegant and extravagant fabrication and brainwashing mechanism that squeezes as much tax money as possible from the common people and is financed by the labor of the common people. As I have said over and over again, everything from medicine, nutrition, and food culture to our common knowledge is filled with lies, fabrications, and corruption. And even within this, there are outrageous lies, fabrications, and malicious brainwashing that are pervasive in our subconscious minds and the values that form the basis of our way of life. That malicious brainwashing is carefully spread throughout this world, and this world in general is managed based on its values. And due to these malicious brainwash values, our world has become a society where outrageous exploitation is rampant. The malicious brainwashing values that have played a major role in our most recent civilization over the past 200 years are unmistakably the idea of competitiveness and the idea of winning and losing. This idea of winning and losing and the supremacy of competition is largely due to the rule and values of the fittest. Moreover, the value system of the fittest has been reinforced by Darwin's theory of evolution, which states that the characteristics of the strong are selectively retained and evolve. And although Darwin's theory of evolution is nothing more than a completely baseless hoax, it has been incorporated into the foundations of all educational institutions as truth by the devilish people who want to spread a mentality of the fittest throughout the world. It went down. When you understand that Darwin's theory of evolution is a fabricated logic of false authority, and that it has become so dominant in order to create a world where the fittest thrives, you can understand the win-or-lose situation that is so prevalent in this world. You will see that the concept itself is an illusion created to manipulate us. As male viewers will understand, much of the entertainment provided to us since we were children consists of games that are rooted in battle and competition. The manga that supported the golden age of the manga magazine Jump featured all kinds of competitions such as sports, martial arts, and battles, and many of them involved life and death battles. Both Arla-chan and Dragon Ball, which started out as comical stories, ended up being battle manga where life and death were fought. Even Doraemon's feature film series are always life or death adventures. Kinnikuman, Fist of the North Star, Saint Seiya, Yu Yu Hakusho, Captain Tsubasa, Slam Dunk, etc. also have battles and competition as their theme. In the world of computer games that have emerged since then, Super Mario, Dragon Quest, and Final Fantasy all revolve around fighting and killing each other. And even Tetris and Puyo Puyo are all competitive games. Before these games and comics, our world actually experienced World War I and World War II, experiencing real killing, fighting, and competition. Furthermore, fighting and competing in sports were encouraged as festivals and important events, especially with the Olympic Games, which are said to have been revived in modern times. Furthermore, so-called ancient games, such as cards, chess, and shogi, are not actually ancient. They are classic pastimes that express the principles of battle and competition in this world. I think its origins were not invented in this third-dimensional Earth, but in a spiritual world where non-physical beings played with each other to kill time. The concept that we kill and steal from each other through competition and predatory behavior is even reinforced by Darwin's theory of evolution. These rules are also incorporated into daily life in the form of capitalism, a monetary economy. Moreover, this central bank money economy itself is a source of fraudulent match fixing. The most important aspect of a money-centered monetary economy is a system in which the person who founded the central bank can continue to win forever. In the 19th century, our civilization, which was ruled by a carefully prepared system of winning and losing values, was suddenly prepared as a new game field. As I always explain in my videos, the history of this world is a product of lies and fabrications, and by the mid-19th century, this world experienced a civilization reset, and the previous civilization was destroyed. Because it's clear that there is. The basis for this is the number of buildings found around the world that have sunk due to what appears to be mud floods that have buried the ground floor. Strangely enough, we live in buildings like this one, where the first floor is deeply buried and in which the windows and doors are dug out. Some of the buildings we actually use have their first floors buried due to some kind of major disaster, even in Japan. Or perhaps our subways, underground malls, and underground passageways are actually just reusing buried structures from a former civilization. If this observation is correct, then civilizations that preceded ours were buried in clay layers 5 to 8 meters thick all over the world in the recent past. If we assume that it was in the recent past, about 200 years ago, that clay layers as thick as 5 or 8 meters were deposited all over the world, then about 200 years ago, the amount of life on this earth, it is easy to imagine that all, or almost all of them, are extinct. Because of such observations in our world, everything doesn't exist, including the blueprints, estimates, lists of subcontractors, and information on the lineages of those involved in construction for Todaiji Temple, Horyuji Temple, the Hermitage Museum, and Isaac's Cathedral. This makes sense as the reason why it is impossible to recreate it with modern science and technology, even though it is such a beautiful building. Our modern civilization is a new, inferior civilization that has been cut off from the civilization that built Horyuji Temple, Todaiji Temple, Isaac's Cathedral, and the Hermitage Museum. It is thought that the civilization that preceded that era disappeared about 200 years ago at the beginning of the 19th century, and the historical record before that is not only fabricated or lied, but information related to the architecture of buildings. The story about Kato Kiyomasa, who is said to have been a master stone wall builder, was not just a lie. It is likely that all historical information prior to 1800 is fabricated, lies, and malicious manipulation. And if you consider that the world before 1800 was the Warring States period, the age of knights in the Middle Ages, the age of discovery, and the age of invasion, you can see the reason for such fabrications. Yes, our new civilization that began in the mid-1800s was, for some reason, a time of strife and war, just like the NHK special, where we humans were fighting each other and were determined to win or lose. Moreover, for some reason, that era of conflict and war was not a century of fair conflict and war, but a century of match-fixing rules and false flag operations carried out for the purpose of making common people hate and kill each other. After all, the heads of the military, the heads of each country, and those in real power never looked after their wounds, but instead only strengthened their own control. In short, by fighting wars, the match-fixing rulers have repeatedly enriched their own pockets, regardless of the differences in the country, while the common people have lost their lives and assets. It's a match-fixing central bank, a capitalist economy, a match-fixing world of war and competition, and a fake and fabricated Darwinian theory of evolution and the fittest. The sense of hate towards Chinese and Korean people that has been spread in such a frenzied manner by SNS, Hezumaru, etc., and countless anti-vaccine news organizations and agents is also in order to continue this civilization of conflict. It's a mechanism. They are spreading crazy extreme patriotism, Nazism, and indiscriminate hatred of foreigners, clearly in the service of the traditional ruling class trying to manipulate people's hearts. And, as always, the Japanese people, who are sorrily blind and have clouded inspirational abilities, are being brainwashed with hate towards Chinese, Kurds, and other foreigners. This is an embarrassingly low level of civility, and we are still completely unaware of what we have been subjected to for the last 200 years. No wonder we are brainwashed by a competitive society where academic background and academic ability, competition centering on deviation education, rankings of companies, competition based on annual income comparisons, and rankings for everything are intentionally spread. And then there are all the indicators, competitions in sports, the rise and fall of GDP, and the constant statements that some country is controlling or manipulating other countries. Our consciousness is being manipulated in many ways. Our consciousness has been conditioned to believe that the problem lies in the fights between countries rather than recognizing that the problem lies with those in power close to us who directly control us. They were completely brainwashed, and whether it was because of such manipulation of our Earth itself or because of our low consciousness, I think it was supporting a worldview of war and strife. As I talked about in the previous video, the problem with Earth's consciousness itself is that our era from the 20th century has become a civilization of bloody competition and the survival of the fittest, and there is no humanity or righteousness, including even match-fixing. It seems that the world has become a world of war. It is believed that the root cause of this situation is the malicious manipulation of Yahweh and the people of that tribe. However, it seems that those of us who have been reincarnated into this world may have wanted to play fighting games to kill time. That's why people like things like playing cards and mahjong, and they also like to gamble on everything, including horse racing and sports. It is true that in this world, most of the movies, novels, and stories are made up of fights, competitions, and murders, and are aimed at manipulating consciousness. But at the same time, we, the general public, were the ones who liked them. It is true that in this world, competition and battle have been advertised and provided as content, but at the same time, it was us ordinary people who were also happy about it. In other words, it's like being happily deceived. The reason why we treat Chinese, Koreans, and other foreigners as enemies, look down on them, and hate them is not just because they are being instigated and deceived. In other words, they like to look down on people in a discriminatory way. And in the civilization that we have been living in since the 20th century, people who naturally like to discriminate, look down on, and fight each other ended up gaining an advantage and becoming winners. But guess what? This world is about to ascend in dimension as the frequency of the Schumann resonance increases. We are in a situation where lies, deceit, ego, and the value system of being good enough for oneself are coming to an end. And a new civilization is rising toward a new dimension where peace, cooperation, and emotional empathy are emphasized. This change means that even the era of gambling, such as battle manga, the Olympics and World Cup, where competitions are held, and horse racing and sports, where match fixing is rampant due to competition for money, is coming to an end. Signs of this have been appearing for a long time in power harassment and moral harassment in various companies, which are considered to be manifestations of a combative and aggressive mindset, are being treated as crimes year by year. As a result, cases of unreasonable overtime work, forced participation in drinking parties, forced hierarchical relationships, and management of people that deny their individuality are visibly decreasing in companies. An increasing number of companies are now proactively using paid leave, which used to be rarely used. Even in the world of comedians, it seems that until the early 2000s, it was common to have a fierce rivalry with strong wills. But at that time, the comedians themselves were in violent competition with each other. It is common for people to become pacifists and become calmer without realizing it. Even in the home, in our parents' generation, it was common for fathers to be constantly drunk and beating up their children and wives. However, as we reach our parents' generation, families that engage in domestic violence have become a significant minority. To begin with, our 20th century began with bloody events such as the Meiji Restoration Civil War, followed by World War I and World War II, which were filled with wars and mutual killings. However, in the post-war period, people started to want peace, and by the time we became adults, there were almost no adults who thought about going to war. Our consciousness has changed to the point where we no longer do it. Even in modern times, false flag operations, false flag terrorism, and false flag war farce are rampant. And although we live in an age where sports, gambling, and competitive society are all functioning, there is a fundamental difference in this world. The world is becoming more peaceful year by year. If we look at the changes in the history of the 20th century and the modern era of peace, we get the impression that we have been fighting world wars to get rid of our karma of wanting to engage in wars and conflicts. Civilizations that came before us perished for some reason. It certainly seems that there was a mud flood-like reset of natural disasters, but there are also signs that attacks were targeted at specific buildings. In other words, it is almost certain that the existing civilizations at that time waged a devastating war in order to reset the previous civilization. And given that our souls are immortal, it is almost certain that our own souls and the souls of previous civilizations are not unrelated. We ourselves are considered to be the very souls of the previous civilizations that killed each other in that devastating war. The soul of that pre-civilization probably used things like Bushido and chivalry to fight to the death and have a sense of wanting to make the black and white clear, and to make clear the difference between victory and defeat. As a result, the civilization that followed the Meiji Restoration was built around a system with firmly defined rules, competition, and a sense of war. Therefore, society has come to be managed by financial capitalism, winning and losing in court, and the system and mindset of the fittest, such as Darwin's theory of evolution. However, the conflicts that led to the collapse of previous civilizations were caused by a coward who was thought to be Yahweh, using sweet words to make them fight each other, exhausting the strong, and in the meantime making a fuss and claiming that he is the one who is responsible for everything. It is thought that this occurred because an attempt was made to manipulate the world by stealing power. Therefore, from the beginning, fair competition such as duels and competitions involved manipulation through more graphic battles and scrambles that involve match fixing and bribery. Ego is probably at the root of the sense of winning and losing, and when ego becomes a priority, in the end, victory is achieved through trickery and exploitation that utilizes lies and fabrications at any cost. It has an inherent destiny to be the ultimate winner. So we should have known from the beginning that fair fights, competitions, and duels were mere illusions. On top of that, the competitive and warlike society of the 20th century began to operate. We have lived through an era of fighting for about 4 generations, and since the 21st century, we have gradually grown tired of fighting and are beginning to desire a more comfortable and harmonious life. And in the end, the events that started in 2020 were such that we got tired of fighting, competing, and ego, and we became completely stupid. It has been clearly seen in the fields of politics, administration, mass media, and medicine that people enrich their own pockets by providing medical treatment that takes away people's lives or by providing tests for fabricated diseases that are of no use. From our perspective, the winners of society look like ugly monsters. And this time, we have come to realize clearly that the ultimate winners in a competitive society are true cowards who even offer their lives to the devil. In this way, our culture of winning and losing, competition, strife, war, scrambling, superiority and inferiority, strength and weakness in the love of war has essentially collapsed. Choosing to torment yourself and strive for the sake of strife, competition, superiority, competition, vanity, and pride will no longer be an option. This is because the civilization of war, competition, and winning and losing that began in the 20th century has come to an end.
The central bank-based financial capitalism that play a central role will also be destroyed and collapsed.
On the contrary, if these cultures do not collapse, our civilization will once again completely collapse, accompanied by the extinction of the living organisms themselves. However, we have already resolved the karma of winning and losing, so by simply destroying the culture and civilization of winning and losing, we should be able to see the dawn of a new era and a new civilization. As the value system of winning and losing collapses, wars will cease to exist. This is because no one will be fooled even if they try to stir things up with false flag operations, and they should continue to exclude the Chinese and Kurds like they are doing now. This is because it cannot become such a nonsensical insult. On the other hand, unless the values of winning and losing are destroyed, true peace will never be established in this world, nor will a shared economic system be established. At least among everyone who watches this channel, and at my own level, we need to let go of the mindset of winning and losing, superiority and inferiority. At the very least, unless we are able to change our consciousness in this way, the consciousness of this world will never change. Therefore, if you truly desire peace, please try to eliminate the mindset of winning and losing. And the culture that was essential to realizing our civilization of war was a culture of carnivory accompanied by devil worship. There is a movement against this meat-eating culture, mainly overseas, and that is what veganism is all about. There was controversy over the fact that many of the meals provided to athletes at this year's Paris Olympics were vegan. Although it is already patchy, The movement to stop eating meat and move away from being a predator of the fittest is spreading mainly in Europe and America, which have a much deeper carnivorous culture than Japan. If we want to bring peace to this world and human society and avoid repeating the damage caused by war, we need to at least stop eating meat and become vegan. The act of killing animals that are less powerful than us and eating their meat for gourmet food is nothing more than a unilateral fight ethic. As long as we eat meat, exploitation, fraud, unilateral persecution, war, and killing will never disappear from our human society. In other words, the responsibility for the wars and people killing each other in this world lies with each and every one of you who are currently eating animal flesh. To put it another way, if it is decided that our world will be freed from competitive values and the survival of the fittest will end, then humans who eat meat will be left out of this world. This means that they will be excluded. It may be a premature death. The death of those who eat meat is actually being brought about by the coming wars in other countries or shots of vaccines. Depending on the location, the judgment may also be executed due to natural disasters such as earthquakes and tsunamis. And in Japan, hate against China is clearly being spread intentionally through social media and other media. And for some reason, that information and awareness is spreading mainly among so-called anti-vaccinists. This unnatural spread of hate against Chinese people and other foreigners in Japan, the spread of Nazism that uses even the non-existent Jomon period to fuel the vanity of the Japanese people, has its own eugenicism and preying on the weakest. I can't help but feel that this is a ploy to induce people into further hatred and conflict. In the near future, a huge earthquake, a crisis in Taiwan, and a war will occur against the barbaric Japanese people who cannot give up their meat-eating habits. And the situation is starting to look like a final selection will take place. Of course, Japan is not the only barbarian race that eats meat, but it cannot be denied that Japan is also one of the targets of population reduction in order to reset civilization. At least for everyone who watches this channel, please step away from being a glutton for the fittest by going vegan and restricting your sugar intake, and use that great inspiration for the good of this world. Our channel believes that veganism, carbohydrate restriction, and trauma relief through trauma notes are essential conditions for opening the door to civilization in this new era. If you are interested, please apply as a friend online and receive the necessary information from Endo for free. But this is only for Japanese audiences. You can also apply to join Endo Online Salon, a community made up of people who are already practicing veganism, low-carbohydrate diets, and trauma notes by applying as a friend on this line. Today's last song is Kazumi's vegan song, Mukuro. There will also be a Nika Nika Live after the premiere. Today as well, we will continue to broadcast from a shopping center in Moscow.
時を越える海風潮とムクロの波今私の間をすり抜けては嘆くうつろな瞳並ぶ鉄格子の国傲慢と裏切りを諦めで潰した愛と綺麗に飾ってどれだけの命積めばやがて気づくのでしょうか血みどろの叫びすらも檻の向こうに隠して砕いてちぎってつ に果て知らぬ欲は自己矛盾の声さえ雑音と捉える冷酷な作業のようにどれだけの涙飲めば世界は変わるのでしょうか。ほんのひとさじだけの甘さにいつまでも勝てない従うばかりで心の安寧と言い訳の山見つめても今も続く残虐に手は差し伸べられずどれだけの命詰めばやがて気づくのでしょう